Hi, it's Chris Magias, creator of Flux Destiny. Today we're completing our series about the journey of Flux Destiny, and I've got some really cool special guests with me here from our Flux Destiny fandom. I've got our lore leaders, and who are joining Ella and I as we go over some questions about what is canon and what is not canon in the new Flux Destiny universe, and as it relates to material that existed before that. So I'm really excited to have these guys here. If you haven't gone and joined the Flux Destiny community, you absolutely need to go to join our Discord server, because we have such a cool group there, and these lore leaders are there to help not only just like get you acclimated, but help you with creating your OC and understanding the lore of the universe, things like that. So go to fluxfandom.com and you'll get right in. So with that said, I'm just going to go, each of the lore leaders have kind of presented their own questions and things they want to discuss and bring up, and I'm just going to go in order with each one, and we'll go from there. So we'll start ladies first. So we'll start with Ella, and who is our RPG community manager, and she's also head of our RPG. Hey, Ella.
Hey, I'm not like a lore leader, but I encourage the lore leaders a lot. You know, I give them, they're like the ducks, and I give the bread to the ducks, you know? Well, I guess that you're not supposed to do that anymore, are you? So maybe that was a bad analogy, but yeah, so I think my first question is, straight off the bat, I think kind of maybe a tough one, so you could take this as you want. But I want to know who is still canon. You know, we've got a lot of characters in the pilot book, and even further back. Give us a rundown of who's not in anymore.
So if you look at the whole, of the main cast, obviously Marco, Hugo, and Lucky are canon. I mean, but I think if I give you like an overall umbrella over this, you have to understand that these characters are going to appear. All the characters appear in the new canon series, but they have different origins, or they have different motivations, or things like that. So Marco and Hugo obviously appear. So does Lucky as the main protagonists. But then when we start talking about some of these other characters like Cooper and Finn and Persephone, these characters, I feel it's hard to create a character even for like a pilot and not, like you can't abandon them. I can't do that, right? Like I cannot do that.
I mean, you could.
But that's not the lovable Chris that everyone knows, right? Like I'm not going to leave anyone behind, right? No character left behind. So they are all going to somehow make an appearance in the canon world. Maybe not necessarily in the mainline series, but somehow or another get introduced back in, like Alistair, who's in there as well. He will also find his way back in. So the short answer is most of them are canon. The longer answer is that they are going to be reintroduced in different ways. That's a good question, though.
All right. Well, so the short answer is they're canon. The long answer is they're not canon yet. I see.
Not canon yet, right? Their time will come. How about that? So if anyone happens to really enjoy those characters. So for example, if Dr. Witherspoon comes back into this, he will probably have a different, he'll probably have a different, origin and things like that coming in. Or he may be the, a clockbot, researcher like he was in that book. But it just depends. So like I said, the short answer is they're not yet, but they will be.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Sure. Thank you. So next we'll move over to Boofy. So Boofy, who I know that you probably have some good questions for me. So.
Okay. Well, the thing that drew me to this fandom the most was definitely your characters. So my first question is character-based. Characters like Kazuo Kazuhara and Maria Mendoza, they obviously don't appear in the pilot book. However, there's been concept art of them for a while now. were you planning to bring them into the series in that timeline, or was this always a proof of concept book? Like, when were they planned to come in if this had been the main series?
So the answer to that is also a bit nuanced. So the answer was they were intended to be brought in to that universe, because as I was developing it, I thought I would continue that continuity. But as I developed the universe during that development period, while I was developing the magic system and the setting and the universe, so much had to change that it would not. There was no way to really shoehorn that universe in it, that particular moment in time in a way that made sense. And it's sometimes better just to pull the Band-Aid off and say this was pilot and this was, proof of concept, and that going forward the characters would be more naturally fit in instead of trying to retcon things to make everything work. So
I know how you feel about retcons.
And you know how I feel about retcons. So I said, no, that's got to go. So they, there was an intent to bring them to try to continue that continuity, but I didn't continue that way, and I decided to just say this is a little moment in time in a bubble universe, in a bubble pilot universe, and that's it. So,
in that case, may I ask a follow-up question?
Ask as many as you want.
Do you know the point in which you decided, okay, you know what? No, we're cutting this one, starting a new one. New universe creation powers. Pew.
So that's a good question too. It was relatively fast, because as I started developing it, I would say that, in fact, around the creation of Kazuo, the Kazuo character, who you'll discover plays a very, very, very pivotal role in the whole series, took about 3 years to develop that character of like intense development. If you see all the material that exists for Kazuo, it's a lot of material. And during the development of his character, I realized that I said, I'm going to have to change things. I'm going to have to change things to make it work. And then the magic system, and then the backstory to the whole world, everything that was created. So everything had to change to accommodate that. And it felt good to do that, because I've talked about this before in my other live streams, where one of the most important things I learned as a writer and as an artist was the superpower of throwing things away. Like, as artists, we all get, precious about the stuff we create. We're like, oh, we write something. We're like, I spent all this time. Well, no, like the power of iteration is what I learned. And I was like, no, don't try to duct tape everything together. Now you have what you want. So toss this. And now we know how we're going to move forward. And doing so freed me up, because otherwise I would have had to create all sorts of contingencies and things to make, and tangents and all sorts of stuff to make everything work. And I don't want to rig it. I'd rather just start from a fresh canvas.
Awesome. Good to know Kazuo was the one that ruined everything.
He did, yeah.
I love it. I love that guy.
Yeah, his scenes, which play pivotal roles in the book, I would argue have taken the longest to write for these, because of the role he plays. So, and I don't want to disappoint you. So,
hell yeah, I know he's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, of course. No, thanks, Booby. Is that all?
For now, yes. I'll wait for my turn again.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Mal?
Hi.
Hey, Mal.
Hello. Well, like with Bofi, what drew me in was your characters, but what kind of got me to stick was the minutia. I like little details. Little things are kind of where the heart and soul is. So I've got lots of little questions, and we'll start with something real simple for you. I've asked about this before, but let's codify it in a video. The broken gear piece situation, it being treats, is that still a thing? And if so, where are the mouths that they put them in?
I'm going to be quite honest with you. I didn't consider that in this yet, because that was just something cute I did for that book. But I figured Well, actually, no. Hold on a second. To be fair, there is a scene in this next book where I don't know if this is really spoil. I guess Ella can chop it out if we end up deciding.
It's a spoiler. Don't. I know what you're about to say. Don't.
Okay.
It's a spoiler.
Okay. I won't.
Oh dear.
I won't say it then. Okay. So the answer is then yes, I guess, but it's not like. Boy, you really threw me for that because I didn't really. Okay, so the answer is no. Like, it's not a thing. It's not a thing in this one. Because when I think about how these Gears of Destiny work and how we've, like, finalized the canon around everything, it's not really something that would work. It wouldn't make sense. Because they would, it wouldn't make sense in that case. So, I hope not to retcon this later. So, I'm telling you now, but I'll leave myself a little. Until the next book comes out, that canon is not like solidified, but I can tell you at this moment, no, it's not coming back in.
Gotcha.
Okay, and what's the other detail you had?
Well, I mean, I've got a bunch of them, little things.
I
guess the next thing would be something like the cankers. Those were a very driving antagonistic force in that pilot book of yours. Are those still possible? And if they are, I'm guessing it's not going to be how they were presented in that book. So
the first, where they emerged from, that big mouth rupture that still exists in this world, and it's marked on the map. The origin of them and everything having to do with it, I don't think the mechanics as I had perceived it back then would work now, or conceived it, not perceived it, conceived of those. But now, I think it's an absolutely possible thing that we could make work through a number of different mechanisms to make hankers exist. And I kind of had fun making them. I kind of like the name too. I thought I was super clever for the name. So
they do feel like a sore.
Yes. So and that was one.
Sounds painful.
It was painful, writing getting to that point where I was like ready to, where I had something I liked, So, when it comes to the cankers, that idea, that name, that word came to my mind. Like it was probably the quickest thing I've ever named because for whatever reason it just came to my mind for that. Because of the naming, I probably will find some way to bring them back somehow. Maybe even in the RPG, we might bring them as a certain type of payback. But I don't think it'll be the same mechanism in which I introduced them before.
I'm glad you guys brought this in. Can I jump in with something here?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you guys brought that up because when I'm looking back at the way the canker was described and the way it pretty much took over the clockbot, and the way you've said machine karmistry, like the payback targets the creations rather than the caster. Sorry, the performer, my mistake. I always figured the cankers would then evolve into machine payback. Would you say this is accurate?
When you say evolve into machine payback, do you mean in this universe or you mean back then?
Like in the current one, because since payback targets the creations, maybe like the clockbots, would the cankers be?
Yeah, I think that you and I are on the same page, and that's kind of how I saw it. That's kind of what I was inelegantly trying to state, which was I think they would make a return in that method where they would be a form of payback. A form of machine karmistry type payback is basically what I was thinking. But not in the kind of supernatural part that was not. I would explain where things were going, but it kind of reveals there's some pieces of where things were going with the other one that I don't want to say just yet. And so that's why I can't tell you what was really going on, because I don't want to, there's some remnants left. But yeah, short answer is yes.
Got it. Thank you. And sorry, no.
No, it's fine. I think I'll hold there for now.
Okay.
See if other people have questions, and we can come back to me.
Okay. So Jacoby, are you still here? I know we were having problems.
Here.
Oh, okay. All right. So we got our other lore leader, Jacoby, who's also our prolific fan art creator who has made some of the most awesome fan art and has done some OC art for some of our lore leaders and other folks in the community, and is just really special to us. So I'm really love having him. All of you are special to us. I didn't get to say that to all of you, but you are all special to me. So Jacoby, so tell me what do you've got?
I've been thinking about this question a lot. When it comes to Flux Destinies, like the bubble around that they create, is the time limit still 6 minutes and 43 seconds, or has it been expanded due to the creation of fishbowls, allowing people to train more, allowing them to have better control of them?
You know, that's a really good question, because the mechanics of everything have changed dramatically. That particular time that was set for the original, that doesn't exist in this particular universe for a number of reasons. Because back then, that was before, when I did that book, the karmistry system hadn't been fully established yet. It hadn't even been named yet. So, and even payback didn't exist. And so the concept of Flux Destinies, collapsing after a period of time was just another kind of different mechanism that existed. So in this world, in this continuity, which is the official continuity, when you create a Flux Destiny in the real world without a canvas, that's when you have a problem, right? If you create it on a canvas, you're okay. But if you try to create a Flux Destiny in the real world outside of a canvas or a fishbowl, then you are going to be subject to payback, depending on how big of a Flux Destiny you spin up. And I think the Great Machine does not take very well to Flux Destinies being created in the real world. Now, if you create it on a canvas or in a fishbowl, there's no payback. As long as you're feeding in new karma into the fishbowl or into the canvas, as long as that flow of karma is strong, you'll be fine. But no, that's a good question. That's a good detail question. I think Jacoby, Mal is your peer when it comes to these tiny details on things. Jacoby always captures those little tiny details. In fact, I had almost forgotten about that time. that time until he brought it up. So, but no, that doesn't exist anymore. Ella, do you want me to swing back to you?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about, and I'm sure Boofy would have better questions about clockbots than I would, but my question is, I want to know a little bit more about their personality in the new canon. In the old canon, they really only Lucky could talk, and they were kind of could only talk to certain people or only followed certain orders. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they've changed and expanded in the new canon?
Yeah, well, first I'll start with the fact that in the old canon, clockbots were more mysterious in terms of how they worked and how they were more like ancient technology, and no one really could understand how they operated and what made them what they were. And that is no longer the case. In this one, they are mass-produced, but there are origins that we'll discover in the series that I don't want to spoil here, that that give clockbots a very special origin. And so they can all speak. They're all capable of speaking. It just depends on the if you have a toaster clockbot, something like that, it's not going to probably talk to you. But if you have most clockbots, if you had like that library clockbot that we met in that book, would probably exist in this world, and it could speak. It depends on the level of AI they have. If you're a Mark III, you're absolutely going to be able to talk. And if you're a Mark I, you're probably going to have more rudimentary speech capability, because we have to remember that this is also this is 1990, right? Equivalent. Now, while there is certainly a little more advanced technology because of the existence of karmistry versus our world during 1990, the technology is very similar. So we have to kind of look at the technological limitations as well on that. So yeah, that's they can talk for sure.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Sure. Boofy, you got any Clockbot questions?
I didn't, but I do now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to actually ask something else beforehand.
Yeah, sure.
Relating to Flux Destinies. So I think I know the answer to this one, but I just want to solidify it. Originally, the Flux Destinies had a risk of like leaking, and you mentioned in the book that had a possibility of spreading. It was a bit of an, as I understand it, like an infinite spread, like it could actually take over. Is that still the case?
No, that's not the case anymore for a number of reasons, because as I developed the Karmistry system, it takes into account that you need a certain amount of karma, right, to create a Flux Destiny, and you would, to overwrite the whole world like I was proposing with that, it was a different mechanism. That mechanism almost saw a Flux Destiny like a virus, right, that could replicate and spread over. In our official canon now, Flux Destinies are made possible through Karmistry, which requires input, like karmic input into it, right? So it's instead of a virus or a mold spreading out, you have things coming in. You need it's like a hole in the ground, right? Where like water is going to pour into it. So not infinite where like a black hole, but rather it requires that to keep it going. So no, you don't have a risk of a runaway Flux Destiny the same way. And you bring up a really good question. By asking that, it allows me to say that it allows me to explain why I'm so anti-retcon, right? Is that I hate having to create and conjure and conceive of excuses for why things work because things were not fully thought out, right? And so when you do that, you start creating a world that starts getting kind of shaky, right? Because you got to start creating new answers for things that didn't, that are problematic. So for our universe, that's why I said I'm going to strip it down to the foundation, and we're going to start fresh with this, and we're going to make this right, and we're going to make it work. And the way that I did that was to start with a magic system and come up with all the elements, because as you guys know, you guys have asked amazing questions in the lore channels. You've seen all the questions everyone else answers. I think 99% of the time I'm pretty good at answering them, and they're pretty solid answers if I do say so myself. But that came from several years of developing the system, so that every possible, not all, but every possible contingency I've thought of, like, well, what about this or what about that? Like, remember when someone asked about nesting Flux Destinies? Can you put them inside each other and things like that? These are all things that are questions that are great because they stress test the magic system to see how much did you really think it through. Because what you don't want is to have like an atomic level loophole in your magic system that everything falls apart. Like the whole exhaust port in the Death Star argument that people always try to use that as a plot, hole, or a weakness, a plot weakness. I wanted to root out as much of that as possible by stripping everything down and building it from the ground up. So that's a good question.
Yeah, it would also be really scary. Suddenly,
yeah.
Existence of this one person thought of.
Well, it also defied logic and reason, right? And what I mean by that is that why would you build things in Flux Destinies like that stadium? Like anyone could ask, any like person who stopped could say, well, why would they use such dangerous technology to build something like a stadium, right? If it could do that, if it could overwrite the world, if it was untethered. And my issue with that as an author is that the minute someone cannot suspend their disbelief, you're starting to lose them because the illusion is lost. So if they cannot suspend their disbelief and be in the story and not be like, wait a minute, bugged by a logic problem, then you're lost them because they're obsessed with, that's not possible, that could never happen. No, it's like this, when people watch scary movies and they're like, I would never stick around, I would run away. Why are they going into the house, right? When there's an axe murderer in there. That's a logic problem that creates doubt and confusion and disbelief, and sometimes cynicism in the reader or the audience, because I think even if they don't think of it from the very highest level, even if it's very subconscious, to me, it's almost like, as a writer, it's like saying the writer was sloppy, right? And took the easy way out and didn't think about the logical implications of the decisions they were making. And so for me, I take that very seriously, because I want people to look at it and go, you know what? He really thought this through, And it doesn't mean that it's bulletproof, right? Obviously, someone's going to come up with something and go, oh, what about this? Okay, but I'm hoping that the issues, any little things that come up, are things that are not like load bearing, right? Like that are catastrophic. Like this is a pillar that the whole thing will fall apart on. I'm pretty confident that that's I'm knocking on wood. You hear it? I'm knocking on wood that that's the case. So good questions.
Goody. I think you've got it solid right now. You've been working on this for years, and it's something that really shows. Like, because you always take the time to come up with a really good answer if you don't think you have one instantly. Yeah, I see it all the time in the lore channel.
Well, and I have to say that it also comes from the fact that I've had several people work with me during this time to develop it and bring their perspectives and kick the tires, right? So they could see and I invited that, even when Ella came on, she came on at this latter stage when the cement had been drying, and, invited her to kick the tires too. And there have been instances in the lore channel, and I've admitted it, when someone has said, I go, I haven't thought of that, and I need to think about it for a minute. But I never want to answer on the spot if I'm in a situation like that. I have to think it through, because I have to think of all the impact that answer will have going forward, right? So when someone asks something that's seemingly benign, I'm trying to think of a question. There was one that someone asked the other day, and I can't remember what it was, but it was it on the surface sounds like it was the question, Ella, is the one you and I were talking about. It was the one about, whether you could take sigils and put them on paper, right? Yeah. And like, can you just do an ink artist, can they just draw a sigil on paper and have it self-activate or whatever? And off the cuff, it would have been very easy to say yes. Yeah, of course you can do that. Well, that introduces all sorts of problems, right? It actually makes ink fighters less special in a certain way, because if you can just put things on paper, that's one thing. And then secondly, you start creating all sorts of mechanical problems in the world by doing that, because the way that the ink fighters and escape artists were designed was to make each one have a pro and con, right? And if you start creating this world where people can start like applying the sigils to anything, it becomes really problematic. So I think slept on that for like 24 hours and talked to Ella privately about it, and before we made a decision on that. So
yeah, there just wasn't enough. Sometimes things in this world, everything has a consequence, and so sometimes it's easy just to be like, well, yeah, that's cool, like let's do that, but that's not what this world is about. It's not about creating the coolest, best power. And I think, Chris, I really commend you on that, because it would be really easy to be like, my world is the coolest. But I don't think that makes a good story sometimes. I think that you've done a really good job holding back things that could be really cool in favor of the story. And I honestly think it's really noble of you, because it would be easy just to have the coolest world in the world and, and just go off and do whatever you wanted. And instead you've chosen a route in which you have to be really careful, and there are consequences to powers, and I honestly think it makes it more believable, but I also think it makes it more interesting.
I really appreciate that, because I'm glad you brought up the consequences, because not only is consequence a theme in the story, of the whole Flux Destiny series, but it is a way that I do storytelling and world building in general, is that every decision as a story maker or world builder that you make has consequence, right? And like Ella said, if we created a universe, when we created Karmistry, I wanted to it's a very powerful system, right? But the problem is that you could easily become too godlike in this world, right? If you're not careful. And so all these things had to be put in place to to control the power of cardistry so that you didn't have OP'd characters and Mary Sue's running all over the place, right? It's no fun if everyone can do that. What makes stories more fun are the obstacles and hurdles people have to overcome. And so this exact moment talking about sigils and their ability to be transcribed on paper, after thinking about it, was like, no, it's way too powerful and problematic to do that, and it's going to create all sorts of issues with it. You know, so anyway, so I appreciate you saying that, Ella. So Mal, did you have something else for me?
Yeah, I've got a pair of questions that I think kind of fit together. In Fortuna's Rings, our favorite boys do some rather impressive acts. And I wanted to check to see if that's something still possible, something that others can do, or if it's unique to them. So the first is it still possible for someone to like interact with the Great Machine and sort of create temporary fake gears, if only just to patch briefly?
So the answer is yes. Though what I've changed since then, and it's kind of been part of the development of Flux Fantasy, is that, you know, if you recall, there was a certain part where Hugo like literally dunked the upper half of his body inside a rift to go into the Great Machine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be so dangerous to do that in this particular canon now that I started introducing helmets for these clockwork escape artists, and they kind of look like astronaut helmets, that they have to wear helmets to protect themselves when they go in there. So that is a yes, that they can still do that, but albeit they need more protection. And then secondly, the creation of temporary gears is one of the things that Hugo can do. That's one of his practical powers that he has as an escape artist. So that is maintained for sure.
And I guess the other sort of adjoining thing is there's a point where Hugo does this, and I kind of like the thought, so I want to see if it's still a thing. Would a particularly skilled clockworker still be able to cut their way into the Great Machine without needing a clockbot to assist them?
The answer to that is yes. Because of the nature of the work that they do, they have to be able to access it. But I don't think, I think it's more dangerous to do that without a clockbot, because you need the clockbot to be able to suture things up more quickly and more efficiently than someone could who's just, a human. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Maybe there'd be a thing of like running the risk of cutting yourself on a shard of reality. That might be a bit of a problem.
Exactly. We didn't sweep it all up. It's a mess.
You really need to be careful.
So,
I suppose.
Imagining Hugo. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, imagining Hugo halfway into the rift, being like, "Well, there's your problem. Your universe is broken."
That's
with
exactly
a southern
right.
accent.
That's it, in his accent, in his deeply caricatured accent from the chat bot. That was like way over the top. But yes, that's exactly that. You actually did a pretty cute rendition of that. I can see that. I actually want to draw that.
Thank
now.
you.
I want to draw that now. That's really cool.
Oh, I love that.
I wish I could draw the accent, but I can't. So I guess I'll have to do that with the text. So we're going to do one more question for this one, and this has been such an awesome conversation that we need to do a two-parter for this for sure. So, Jacoby, did you have another question?
Yeah, one. So the way Karma was using Fortuna Rings, you kind of already answered this, but the way Karma was using Fortuna Rings, it was like used for like everything, like skyboarding and machinery, and even just it even turned out to be a little ghost story at the end. With the new rules of Karma, how badly do you think Payback would have been if the concept of Payback was in Fortuna's Rings with everything going on?
That is a really good question. That is actually a really good question. Had Payback existed in the other one, it would have had to, I think, radically change the plot, because I think the things that Dr. Witherspoon was involved with and doing and performing would have had to change dramatically, because I think he's essentially performing quantum karmistry in this universe, right, with what he was doing then. And that would have had serious implications. So it would have, now skyboarding and things like that, that would have had no real karmic impact. Like, that wouldn't have had any problem. But the things like the ending of the story, I think, would have been more problematic than what was happening at the beginning. I think the competition with Marco, that probably at the beginning part, the first part of that competition, I think it would have been a little more intense, because they would have had to factor in the payback into it. So, but I think that would have been. Sorry, I'm like, it was such a good question I wasn't prepared for, that I'm like thinking through it. And yeah, I think in large part it would have made big changes to the plot, because payback is such an important element of this story that it has to play a narrative part in the story some way, and it would have been part of the narrative. So yeah, it would have made big changes. That's a great question, by the way. It's a great question. Well, I really appreciate you guys. Oh, sorry, you gonna ask something?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you guys so much so we're going to do a part 2 to this question and answer series on what is canon versus what's not. And I just want to thank my lore leaders here, and Ella, who have worked so hard for this community and who have all this amazing curiosity and sometimes know things better than I do. And kind of put me to shame to be like, oh, I forgot about that as the creator. And so I think I don't have enough space in my brain to hold everything. So I need to outsource it to some really smart people here. But I really appreciate you guys a lot for everything you do for the community, for your love of the story, and for your contributions to what we do. And I'm looking forward to the next conversation, because this will certainly help people who are OG fans who've been here for a while, who were part of the original canon. So thank you guys so much. Thanks so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of this canon versus non-canon video. We're going to do another one very soon. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so you can get alerted to updates. And remember to be sure to check out fluxfandom.com so you can come join our Discord server, and go to fluxfantasy.com to sign up for our upcoming beta for our RPG. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the fandom.